Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I finally have a new setup. I've been trying to get this all in place for a little while now because I wanted to have something a little bit more set and a designated spot in my house to film. Finally got that all set up, finally got everything all organized, so I'm coming back in a whole new location. Wow. Alright, so today I want to do a book review and I wanted to talk about one that I know is going to be controversial for a lot of people. It is currently a huge book right now. Everyone is currently loving it and reading it and passing it around. And I recently bought the book and I read it and I have some thoughts. I definitely have some thoughts. And the book in question that I'm going to be talking about today is The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. And let's just dive right in. So right off the bat, I'm just going to say there are going to be some spoilers for this book. So if you haven't read it yet, and you want to read it, and you don't want to get spoiled for it, please go read it first and then come back. I just don't want to ruin the book for you because there are some good twists and turns and whatnot. So with that being said, there are spoilers in this review. So now that we have that out of the way, I'm going to assume that the people who are left watching this video have read this book, so I don't have to rehash everything that happens in it, and when I talk about certain circumstances, I don't have to give all of the context because I'm sure you guys already know what I'm talking about. So with that little disclaimer right off the bat, I want to talk about the good things first, because I believe we should all talk about the good things first, and then we can dive into some of the negatives. So some of the things that I really did like about this book is that it is picking a topic that is quite controversial, and that is police violence and police brutality and black and white, segregation and that kind of stuff. Well, it's not really segregation, but it's the idea of, I don't know, like, just because you're a cop and just because you're white, you are ultimately better than someone else. So it is tackling some tough issues, and it is tackling stuff that people don't necessarily want to talk about that often, and I commend this book for that. Another good thing that it definitely got right was the writing style was quite easy to read. It was a lot of fun, and it just kind of flowed really quickly. I didn't feel like I had to put a whole lot of effort into picking this book up. There are some books where I have to force myself to read them, but this was not one of them, so that was definitely a good thing. The third good thing that I want to talk about is the fact that Star has such a good, stable family life. I noticed that a lot of times in young adult books, they really don't have a good family life at all, which kind of, it's disappointing because I think we should have parents and siblings and whatnot in the books to also support the main character. And a lot of times we don't have that, or either the parents are just never around or never supportive or whatever the case may be. Her parents were really good and really there. And the fourth thing that I want to talk about is the dialogue is really quite good. I did really enjoy it. It did feel really real. I could hear the people speaking in my head. It was really, really well done. Really flowed very, very gracefully. So with that said, those are the pros of this book. Those are the ones that I thought that were worth mentioning and that were really good. There's a couple other good moments, but I'm not gonna pick out each and every individual great moment that I thought were good moments. I didn't think there was any great moments in this book, but I thought there were some good moments. So now I'm going to talk about the cons, and I feel like this is really where it's gonna be kind of controversial, so let's dive right in. Alright, so let's talk about some of the bad things in this story. So one of the main things that I had a problem with was the main character. She annoyed me so much, and I think most of the bad part of this review is going to be about her. She is a 16-year-old girl she's African American, and she lives in the ghetto, but she goes to school in this white neighborhood. She is one of the, well, I can't say the brattiest protagonists that I've read about, but definitely one of them. I am constantly confused as of her state of mind, and a lot of people don't quite get what I mean when I say that, but she's she's seen multiple people get shot and killed, two of them being her best friends. She's been through some extraordinary trauma that would force most people to grow up really quickly. However, this kid is still stuck being exactly that, a kid. She won't be, she is refusing to grow up in almost a weird way. And I find that very odd considering her circumstances. You would think because of how she's growing up, because of how she was raised, because of where she is situated in life, she would grow up so much faster. But she's done actually the opposite of that. It seems to me that she is still in this headspace of 8 or 9-year-old. She throws hissy fits over stupid things. Okay, here's the thing. I get it with trauma. A lot of times people will get angry over stupid things, but some of the things that she's angry about happened before she saw her friend got shot. That was a horrible sentence. Before she saw her friend get shot. So, for instance, let me talk about Chris, who is her boyfriend. He's a white boy, and I honestly thought he was a halfway decent character. He wasn't bad, but he was a little bland now and again, but he wasn't bad. So, most of the characters, actually, just offside note, most of the characters were quite good in this book. Star, she was a decent character. I just didn't like the character, so that's why I'm kind of griping on it a little bit. It's not that she was poorly written or anything like that. It's just I didn't like the character. So she and Chris are 2 teenagers. They're 16 years old, and they're doing what most teenagers do, and that is experimenting with their sexual urges. So they are hanging out in his bedroom, and they are getting all worked up, hot and heavy, and all that other fun stuff. And she is more than happy to continue with the whole situation. And then he does something that she doesn't like. He pulls out a condom and he asks her if she's ready. Now, the most logical thing and the most mature thing you can do in this situation, if you're not ready, to just say, no, I'm not, and to move on. Instead, because he was respectful. He was asking her a question. He wasn't like trying to force anything on her. She was more than willing to be part of whatever was going on beforehand. So he had no reason to think that she wouldn't be okay with him asking her if she was ready to take it to the next step. However, instead of just saying, no, thanks, I'm not ready for that, she flips out at him. And for the next 2 weeks, or I forget how long it was, but for a significant amount of time, she's not speaking to him. She's super angry about it. Oh my gosh, she's forcing him to apologize. Even after her friend got killed, she's still angry at him. And her friends are they're calling Chris, because she told her friends what happened. And so her friends are calling him wow, he's, just being driven by his sex drive, and oh my gosh, he's such a pervert, and blah, blah, blah. And to me, that's so unfair, because they were both willing participants of that situation. If he was forcing himself on her, then I could see them being wow, that's disgusting. But no, they were both willing participants. How is he supposed to know she doesn't want to take it to the next step unless he asks? He asked, she said no, he respected that. But instead of her just saying no and moving on, she got so angry at him and left in a whole hissy fit, and then blamed him later for it. I don't understand that at all. I feel that's so bratty and immature. And if you're not mature enough to handle someone asking for your consent, you're not mature enough to have sex. You're not even mature enough to make out with someone. I'm sorry. You're just not mature enough for that. And I wouldn't have a problem with the situation if the book didn't portray it as in she's right and he's wrong. And that's what I have an issue with. It's oh, he's trying to, force his white male dominance on her because she's a poor black girl. I'm sorry, that's stupid. They were both willing participants in the situation, and he asked, she said no, and they moved on. That's it, plain and simple. There is no white, black, male, female, anything like that. It's just no, stupid. So, for her getting angry, and so then her friends are saying all this mean stuff about him, and very incorrect things about him, and in her head, because the book is all written from her point of view, she's I'm not even mad at him anymore, but I'm still going to pretend like I'm mad. I'm sorry, I don't have the patience for that. That is so immature. And I guess she's in high school, but come on, man. She's so immature. So that was irritating to me right off the bat. And then he tries to make it up to her. He sings the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song or whatever, because that show was their thing. And he grabs her hand, and he's dancing with her in the hall of school, which is a little awkward, but whatever. And she has a freak out again because he's white. And I understand triggers. Trust me, I study psychology, I study trauma and whatnot. I get it. I have a lot of family members who have also been through trauma, and myself, I've been through some things. I get triggers, trust me. However, usually if you watched your friend get shot by a white cop, usually the triggers for that wouldn't be a white person, especially since she's in a whole freaking school full of white people, and she wasn't triggered by any of them. Usually the triggers for someone in that situation, now it's going to be different for everyone, I get that, but usually it's going to be maybe the uniform of the police officer, maybe it's going to be an actual gun, maybe it's going to be something like that, maybe it's going to be a sound or smell that reminds you of that night. It's not going to be that one white guy who you've been friends with and who you've been dating for well over a year. After they have this whole freaking conversation, him touching her hand is what makes her go off. And she's like, all I can see is that he's white, all I can see is that he's white. And I'm like, you were just hanging out and touching your other friends too. Like, one girl was like resting her head on her shoulder, and they're all white kids, and like, I don't like, it's either the whiteness, the maleness, or the touching. That's the problem. But she's had someone who's white touch her. She's had someone, like, I don't get the trigger point for that. And so it was just weird. But that's a little weird hang up that I have. Anyway, it didn't ruin the whole book for me, that moment. But moving on. I thought there were some other moments that were just very inconsistent and frankly kind of racist too. And I know a lot of people don't like to say that white racism exists, but it really does. I'm sorry, racism by definition is just disliking a group of people based off of their skin color and their race. It has nothing to do with whether you're black or whether you're Hispanic, Latino, or whether you're Asian or whatever. You can be whatever ethnicity. If you're disliking someone because of their skin color, you're racist, regardless if you're a minority yourself. Just because you're a minority does not mean you're necessarily oppressed. That's just something that no one really gets. And it's like, okay, there are minorities in every single nation, in every single part of the world, of every single color. Just because we're in America. And also, I'm kind of going off on these weird tangents. I'm sorry. Also, where are they supposed to be in this book? I'm not 100% sure what city they're supposed to be in, because the setup is a little odd to me, but that's something totally different. Maybe if anyone knows where this book is supposed to take place, please let me know below, because I'm not really 100% sure where it's supposed to take place. I was thinking maybe Chicago or Detroit, but then I was like, I don't know. I just feel like some of the geographical situations wouldn't necessarily work. But anyway, moving along. Some of the comments made in this book I thought were quite racist and quite. I'm not easily offended. Like, I'm really not. But there are just some things in this book that just really irked me, because racism is definitely a real issue, and no one should ever be made to feel lesser because of their skin color. Absolutely not. But this book is not combating hate, which is what I thought it was going to be. It's not combating the idea of hate. What it's instead doing is channeling that hate at a different group. It's not getting rid of it. It's not dispersing it. It's not saying, hey, everyone's equal and should be treated as such. It's saying, no, okay, this group has been hated for too long, we need to hate this group instead. That's what it's saying, and that's what the problem, and that's why I'm kind of getting irritated with it, because it's not just the book that's the problem. If this was the only book that had that kind of message, I wouldn't have an issue, but this is a book that is summing up a problem that is so huge and so prevalent right now in our country. And that is just where we think it's okay to say, well, we don't want to hurt someone's feelings, so we're going to instead put all this mean stuff on someone else. When that's not right either. If you want to be treated equally, you have to treat others equally. And that's just the way it's always been. If you want to be treated fairly, you have to treat others fairly. And there are so many examples in this book of people, of like Star herself not doing that. And she's the main character, and she's the person who the audience is supposed to look up to and be like, how are we supposed to handle ourselves in this situation? And she's supposed to be our example. She is the worst example in the universe in this story, because they're teaching you that violence, so long as it's directed at someone who doesn't like you, is okay. For instance, Haley, her friend, says some kind of offensive things, well, quite offensive things actually, which I just can't imagine anyone saying. I feel like it's a bit exaggerated, but maybe it happens. I don't know. Maybe my sheltered little life is too sheltered. So I'm not going to have a bone to pick with that too much. But her friend Haley says some very just gross, disgusting things. Yes, they are very racist things. And in response, Star gets into a fight with her. Reaction-wise, I don't have a problem with that, because guess what? She's a character. She's supposed to be portraying a human being. Human beings make mistakes, and human beings fight. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with how her parents and how, like, rational people handle the situation. So, for instance, she gets home and her parents are like, we're very disappointed in you, Star. And then 2 seconds later, there's like no punishment. And Star's like, oh, I understand that, because they didn't give me any punishment. Is that they're secretly like kind of condoning what I did. Like, they're proud of me. For what? for letting sticks and stones, not break your bones, but have the words beat you to death. Like, that's what it really is. You're not allowing the words to flow off, because at the end of the day, they're just words. People who attack based off of something verbal, that's ridiculous. If you are attacking to save your life or to prevent physical harm against you, that's totally fine. It's called self-defense. However, if someone comes up to you and calls you a mean name, you don't necessarily have the right to beat them. And that goes the same for anyone. If you come up and call me white trash, I'm not going to beat you. Just like if someone comes up to a black person and calls them something horrible, you don't have the right to beat them up. Like, that's obviously is horrible and rude, but that's saying something about the person saying that. But then if you fight them, that's saying something about you. And that's where it's just like, okay, rise above them. And Michelle Obama even said, when they go low, we go high. That's exactly what it means. And for this character to kind of portray, it's like, oh, just because this person said some mean things, I am justified in whooping them. That's the wrong message. And that's not really, smacking down hate and saying down with hate. We don't want to, keep hate going. That's saying we just need to shift hate to someone else. And once we shift hate to someone other than us, we'll be okay. But that's not getting rid of it. It's just dispersing it to other groups. And that's just a problem. So that's an issue. Also, I want to talk about the scene in the car towards the end of the book where they're talking to Chris, because this, I feel like, sums up a lot of the problems in the book. And a lot of the problems in real life, too, where there's three black kids in the car, and Chris is the only white kid. And the three black kids are asking him questions about, like, things that he does, and they're like, why do white people do this? They're making just very generalized statements about all white people that if you were to turn it on to, like, black people, they would say that's racist. So, for instance, they're like, how come every white person wants to do crazy, risk-taking things like bungee jumping or whatever? And then they're like, how come every white person in, like, horror movies want to split up when they're in danger? And, how come every white person wants to do this and wants to do that, and yada, yada, yada. And I don't have a problem with this scene if what happens next hadn't happened. So they're just ribbing Chris. It's all a good fun scene. I actually was enjoying the scene. I thought it was quite funny. Until this moment came when Chris said, hey, can I ask you guys a question? There's instantly the car goes silent. And the kid, 7, who's driving the car, he almost swerves into the ditch because he's so shocked that this white kid would have the audacity to ask him and to ask his black friends one question. And it takes his girlfriend, Star, saying, you know what, guys, it's kind of fair that he asks us one question. So Chris's question, the big bad question, all he says is, how come your names are kind of weird? And he's like Devontae, Star, 7. He's like, they are not normal names. And all the kids kind of get very defensive, which I get, they're kids, but they get very defensive. And then they're like, well, listen. And then they go and they give him a whole lecture on, like, what's normal to you is not normal to us. So what's normal to us isn't normal to you. But, like, you just don't get it because whatever, you're just some little white boy. And they kept going on and on about, like, oh, you've got your weak little names, your little weak, white guy names like Chris and this and that. Well, we've got, Devontae, and we've got, I don't know, like Star, and we've got 7, and we've got, those kinds of names, like different, like, they're cultural names. And they're giving him such a hard time for even asking that question. And then they're like, oh, you just don't get it. And that ruined the whole scene for me, because they're supposed to be portraying like, oh, you just need to understand it from our point of view. And that's fine. That is totally fine that you want someone to understand something from your point of view. However, I start taking an issue with the scene when they wouldn't try to see anything from Chris's point of view. None of them said, hey, you might eat your food this way, we might eat our food this way, but both are great ways to eat food. There's nothing wrong with either or. And now, if the scene had proceeded like Chris was ribbing them and making fun of whatever they do, and they were making fun of whatever Chris did, that would have been totally fine. That would have even been kind of funny, because then you get to see how Chris can give and take, and how they can give and take, and how both cultures, if they just stopped taking themselves so seriously, could just laugh at some stuff. But instead, it was like, oh, one culture is totally fine to be made fun of, while the other one you can't even ask one question about, otherwise they almost go into a ditch. And it's like, what? You know, like, it didn't come to the conclusion of, hey, both cultures have a lot to offer and both cultures are really cool and should be, you know, embraced and whatever. Instead, it was like, no, one culture is better than the other. And that's exactly where racism stems from. And that's the entire problem with the story, because the entire story is saying one culture is better than the other. And one culture is forever going to be oppressive, even though they're not doing literally, like, they're not literally doing anything. And Star is saying, oh, I feel this way, I feel this way. Feelings are not facts. Because you feel something does not mean that it's actually happening. Just because you walk into a school and you say, oh my gosh, every white person here hates me, that is your personal feeling. That is not what happens. That is not, most people don't care. Most people see you, they don't care. They really don't. But it's like, think about someone who has like depression or something like that. And they're like, my family members aren't there for me, I'm all alone, yada yada, all this stuff. And that's never the case. It is their anxiety, it is their depression talking, and that's what they have to kind of shed off. It's the same in this situation. A lot of the times when Star is sitting there griping about people hating her and people being racist, no one's actually being racist. It really is all in her head. It is all these feelings she's feeling. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. I'm not saying that people aren't racist. I'm saying in her situation where she's constantly thinking that everyone's out to get her, most people aren't. Most people don't care about her. Most people don't care about her in the way of like they don't know her. They don't they couldn't care less because she's a stranger. They don't care what she does with her life. But she thinks constantly that people are out there judging her. You know, she walks into the room and she uses a slang word and instantly boom, everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're from the ghetto, you're a horrible person, ew. No one's like that. No one is like that. If anything, people think you're cool if you talk with slang and you're ghetto and you're whatever and you smoke, do drugs, whatever you want to say. I don't even know. I don't do drugs. So I'm a good little child. But it's just this idea that has no basis in fact at all, where you feel something and must make it true. No, I'm sorry. That's not it at all. And that's the entirety of the racism in this book that Star is constantly talking about. I feel that, therefore, must be true. And people are like, well, no, it's not just her feelings because she saw her friend get shot by a white cop. Okay, but here's the thing. She also asked her black uncle, what would you do in that situation? Would you shoot Khalil? And he said, I don't know. She asked her black uncle, who was a cop, would you shoot Khalil? And he said, I don't know. Because in those situations, you're going to think about it from the cop's perspective. You're in a bad neighborhood to begin with. Tons of gangbangers around. You see this guy, you pull him over for whatever reason. It was like a broken tail light or whatnot. Keep in mind, there had been a shooting 2 blocks down at another party, and these kids were coming from that party. There's going to be some suspicion right there. That's another sketchy thing. This cop has to think about his own safety and his own life as well. He gets to the car door and he says, license and registration. That's all he says. And the kid instantly starts giving him attitude. I'm not saying the kid deserved to be shot. I am saying this kid was not listening to actual directions. He was just being asked to give his license and registration, as anyone in any situation would be asked, and he refused to do so. And then the cop asked again, and the kid still refused. And then the cop pulled him out of the car. And the cop told him, you stay up against the car, you don't move. He walked away for 2 seconds. What did the kid do? He immediately walked over to the car door, opened it up. What does that tell the cop? There could be anything in the car. Should he have shot him? No. I think he should have warned him first, but even if he did shoot him, I don't think it's because he hated black people or he's racist or whatever. So I don't even think that's a legit reason. And Star is griping throughout the entire book where she's like, no one's listening to me because I'm black. No one cares. First of all, sweetheart, here's the thing about due process. You need 2 witnesses to actually back up a story. You can't just take it off of one person. It literally comes down to the cop versus the random kid on the street. That's what it comes down to. It doesn't come down to skin color. It doesn't come down to who's more trustworthy. I mean, it does, because she's this kid who's riding in the car with a drug dealer, and he's a cop, you know, who probably doesn't really have a huge record of bad things. Because regardless of why Khalil was selling drugs, he was selling drugs. He was a drug dealer. Like, it's just, I don't think what happened to him was a good thing by any means. However, I also don't think that the cop was necessarily super in the wrong. Like, he should have thought about what he was doing. He should have maybe taken a step back and been like, okay, I'm not going to just spring into action. But also think about it from his perspective. He's probably already on edge and paranoid because of where he's stationed in that neighborhood. I don't know. But anyway, moving along. So I just feel like it's not, this whole entire book, it's not trying to fix a problem. It's just trying to say, I don't even know what it's trying to say. It's just, maybe it's just like, it's trying to fix the problem. It's trying to bring awareness to the problem where people can start a conversation and we can fix the problem. But really, it's not offering any kind of solution when it comes to racism. And it's all it's doing is saying, look how bad white people are. Look, white people and black people need to be allies in this situation. That's the only way racism can actually be combated. It's not going to be by having one say that we're better than the other. That's never, ever going to be how racism and inequality is fixed. If you want some good books to read that actually talk about this issue and talk about some solutions to this issue and depicts black people and white people in like positive lights, and just talks about the issue in much more detail and in a much healthier way, I think I have 3 books that I can recommend to you right off the bat. The first one is The Help. The second one is To Kill a Mockingbird. And the third one is The Secret Life of Bees. Those are 3 books that are absolutely fantastic to read, and it talks about this issue so well and so eloquently, so much better than I ever could. I definitely recommend those 3 books. And if you haven't read them yet, please go and read them. Don't read this one. It's not even worth it if you haven't read it yet. But, I mean, you can read it. It's not like the worst book in the world, but it's so cringy sometimes. There are just the moments where you're... And if you're anything like me, you're probably going to get a little bit irritated by it as well. So, is it worth it? It's definitely not worth $18.99, but it might be worth a read. It's not too long. You can zip through it pretty fast. So, there you go. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this book. There are definitely some issues in it. There are definitely... I don't know. I can't really sum it up any other way than saying, to quote Ben Shapiro, facts don't care about your feelings. And this book is all about saying, feelings don't care about your facts. That's all it's doing. And that's just a problem for me because it's trying to say that all this stuff, if you look at the stats, if you look at the actual data behind what this book is talking about, like how many black people are killed by cops, how many black people are killed by white cops, what are the, that kind of stuff, you'll find that it doesn't really back up what this book is saying at all. But anyway, I'm just gonna leave this review here by saying I'd give it maybe a 2 stars out of 5, maybe. And that's just for the writing and the couple times that it made me smile a little bit at the cute dialogue. But other than that, it's a book, that's for sure. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I didn't offend anybody. I really don't mean to be offensive or to make people think that I'm trying to attack you or attack anyone. I certainly would never want to do that. But I do want to give my opinions as honestly as possible, and I don't believe in lying just to not offend someone. I don't believe in intentionally trying to hurt other people's feelings, but I also don't believe in lying and pretending like I don't believe something that I do. And I definitely believe that this book has some issues that it needs to fix. So, with that being said, thank you again so much for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and maybe subscribe if you like what you see on this channel. And I'll see you all in the next video. Alright, bye.